Kennedy. The 5. In the middle of the night, while CNN producers were dreaming of their next stormy headline, President Trump welcomed home 3 Americans imprisoned in North Korea. And he did it to great ratings.
I think you probably broke the all-time in history television rating for 3 o'clock in the morning, that I would say. This is a special night for these 3 really great people. And congratulations on being in this country. Thank you. I want to thank Kim Jong-un, who really was excellent to these 3 incredible people.
I never thought I'd hear that. But then again, I never thought we'd have a former reality game show host running the most powerful country. But you'd have to be in your own prison of emotional bias not to see this as a promising step in the direction of a safer world. Right, Chuck?
It is so troubling to hear President Trump say that Kim Jong-un treated the Americans excellently. Their release should not be exalted. It should be expected.
What a wet blanket. But enough about his hair. Anyway, this development puts things in perspective. While news anchors take turns acting shocked over a porn star tryst, 3 Americans are free. And that's the point. Once you get past Trump's unseemly past, you see that it's his entire past that reveals his talents. What America elected is a person with a unique toolkit for a unique time, someone tough-minded enough to engage rogue regimes in terms that they understand. Carrot and a real stick, not fantasies. Who knew that what we needed most was a reality TV star who actually deals in reality? So I wonder, would those freed people have preferred a squeaky clean president fretting alone in the Oval Office as they sat in a foreign jail, or a billionaire tycoon who's not the best husband, but could talk a bear off a fish truck? You know the answer. All right, Kennedy, welcome to the show.
Hey.
You look great in pink, as always. Why is this working? Because it seems to be working.
Because, it's objectively good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is very difficult for anyone to argue that this is not a good thing. And, it's interesting and very predictable that people will certainly try.
Right.
And I think that the visual was great of that plane landing at Joint Base Andrews, and the president and the vice president and the first lady and the secretary of state there to welcome 3 people whose lives in recent history is absolutely unimaginable to Americans. Not the 1% and not those who are comfortable, but to all Americans. We cannot fathom what life is like in those labor camps because very few people get out to tell the story. If you remember at the president's State of the Union address, one of the most moving parts was the man who had escaped North Korea and took his crutches and that embrace of freedom. And it's a continuation of that narrative that is manifesting in very real terms. Regardless how you feel about the president or who you voted for, you have to stop and realize that this is a great moment for our country and for peace.
Jesse, you know what I liked about it was that it was at 3 a.m. Because it feels like Trump saying, I don't sleep. I'm always up. Hillary would have been in bed by now.
He was up for the 3 a.m. phone call.
Yes, perfect. Yes.
So, and great ratings, as you mentioned, from here to the mouth. And I'm sure the ratings were really good. I mean, it was a significant olive branch from Little Rocket Man ahead of the Singapore summit. And he deserves a little bit of credit. I know if Obama had said they were treated excellently, people on the right would have said, what are you doing talking like that about a dictator? But I think that's just Trump's way of negotiating. He fluffs their ego and then he cuts them down when he needs to. That's great. I think it's a big distinction about how Obama dealt with these things. Remember, Obama got a detainee back, but he had to give up 5 terrorists from Gitmo. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to give up anything. Yeah. So this is a significant departure from the last administration. I think this president has put a real priority on bringing back American detainees. We got them back from Egypt, from Afghanistan, from North Korea, even the ungrateful basketball players from UCLA that came through China, they came back. So he's employing the George Costanza method.
Yes.
And what I like to say is whenever Obama did something, Trump does the opposite in North Korea, in Syria, and Iran, and it seems to be working, Juan. It's funny, though, the media is not accountable for all the false things they predicted would happen with North Korea. They said we're going to alienate our allies, South Korea and Japan. We weren't going to get China to help us out. We were going to go to war.
Yeah.
And that Pompeo was not a good diplomat. All of those things have turned out to be wrong. The media is like a bad weatherman. Every day they come out and they say it's going to rain, and every day it's clear skies and sunny. But they never apologize or get fired.
So, Juan, from a scale of 1 being awesome to 10 being super awesome, where would you put this?
Super. I mean, gosh, imagine any of us in that situation.
Yeah.
You want out, and you want out for Americans, and it's good. The part that amuses me first is the business about ratings. I mean, clearly that's what it's there. So it's all about the appearances, about his political popularity. It's about, Republicans will celebrate. Let's put down Chuck Schumer for stating the obvious, that what you really want here is that Kim Jong-un wouldn't be holding Americans and treating them so badly, and we shouldn't be calling him excellent or anything. Jesse, I would just say to you that, in fact, we did give something to Kim Jong-un. We've given him is a summit. We are putting him on the level with us, the United States of America. He has wanted this across administrations. Previous presidents have denied it to him. He is thrilled that he is seen as a world leader equal to our president.
So what was the Obama policy on North Korea? To do nothing and let them nuke up?
We did not do nothing. We
Yes,
had
he absolutely did nothing.
No, we didn't do nothing, but we didn't have any solution. And I think that's why
this summit is a result of sanctions and tough rhetoric.
I think, it's a result of actions taken in terms of prior sanctions. These sanctions are in place, but I also think
all of our allies are very happy with the summit, Juan. I thought making sure our alliances were strong.
Let me just say, though, I think that when you look at Kim Jong-un, what he is building towards, I think, is the idea of the United States accepting North Korea as a nuclear power. Every other American president has said no to this.
Okay, I don't know.
So we'll see where this goes.
With the peace prize.
There isn't evidence to support that statement.
Kimberly, when Trump gets the peace prize,
Yes, when
will
he gets
Juan
it.
finally say, okay. But anyway.
Mark the date on your calendar. But also, if you just go back on this and you look at some of the Korean, Japanese media reports, etc., this was something that Kim Jong-un did reluctantly. Of course, he did not want to release 3 American hostages. He did so because of the unique and non-conforming diplomatic policy and procedures that the president engaged in. This was something that was unsettling to Kim Jong-un, not something that he was familiar with. And President Trump tried a different approach, which has produced a significant and historical result. And when you take a look at this situation, why wouldn't any American say this is a very, very favorable, very auspicious result that happened here? I look at the screen and I see 3 healthy Americans that thought that they didn't have a chance, and they were able to come home to this country. Thank God. Juxtaposed to that, poor Otto Warmbier and his family, and I don't want to forget about him and the suffering that he went through. So really to take a moment to say, we're very appreciative as a country, and we're grateful for this kind of diplomacy that resulted in them being returned.
And think about the children and the babies who were killed in front of their parents in those North Korean labor camps. It's awful. And, Juan, to your point, those on the left have been saying throughout this process, especially when the rhetoric did get heated. And there was so much unpredictability that even, people who support the president didn't exactly know where we were going in terms of North Korea. But it seems to have worked out. You say that no president has gotten to the point where they're meeting with Kim Jong-un. Well, no president has been on the precipice of a real peace.
Oh, no. No. Clinton, Bush both thought they had deals. Either with his father,
the
grandfather.
Six-party talks and the sunshine policy,
so we've been through a lot of this before,
It's
Kennedy.
all hot malarkey compared to.
No, it's not. I think
Definitely
they all said no because guess what? They knew how North Korea ran those prisoner camps. They know how North Korea treats its own citizens.
That's not true.
And
they
don't want
more concessions in energy and relaxing sanctions ahead of talks. That's what they did. They actually gave concessions ahead of time, and then North Korea made promises that were unverified, and they were very naive and trusted that. But the one thing you can say about this process is that has been reversed. So
how is that reversed?
Because Kim Jong-un actually gave up something before both parties came to the table. I'm not.
How about this? In November, he had his 3rd intercontinental ballistic test under this administration. So and thinks that he has completed now preparations for a complete nuclear arsenal. So you stop and you think to yourself, well, wait a second.
What's better? Bombing him
Right.
and bombing all the sites
Listen,
where he's creating
No,
those
I'm just-
weapons,
that's
or
not
going
the
to the
choice.
table and trying to
That's not the discussion we're having
create
at this
some
table.
goodwill
At
between
this
North Korea
moment,
and South Korea to reunite the Korean Peninsula.
I'm all for reuniting the peninsula at some point if we can get a regime in North Korea that is not torturing people, that is
So now
not
Democrats want
criminal.
regime change?
Hang on, let me speak for a minute. So what you get here is a situation where you have a guy who has nuclear weapons that he's been testing under this administration. We have previous administrations that thought they had a deal. Now we have President Trump with his rhetoric, and we don't know what kind of deal.
unbelievable.
But what happened with these 3 prisoners, as much as we appreciate our people coming home, is not to be seen as, oh, this is a radical change. He's released prisoners before.
I think this is why the American people don't like Washington, because you have people like Juan and Crying Chuck who will not give credit where credit is due.
What is the credit?
I remember when Obama killed bin Laden.
Yeah.
And a lot of Republicans gave credit where credit was due.
Yeah.
The Navy SEALs. Just kidding, Juan. But I think there's a spirit of bipartisanship when it comes to foreign policy. And it used to exist in this country when good things happened to America and American citizens and people were moving toward peace. Let's just remember, they just signed something that said that they wanted to end the Korean War.
Yeah.
The Korean War, since 1951,
Right.
to sit back and nitpick about some of the things that we're talking about here looks small and it just looks partisan.
And now we're, KG,
Yeah.
the stage is set for Singapore. So this
Yes,
is moving.
absolutely. July 12th. And if you look at the approval number of Americans favorably wanting this to happen is 77%. So, Juan, I just beg to differ because to me, it seems like Americans are for this. We are for peace. We are for diplomacy. We're sitting down. He's not afraid to break the modern rules of diplomacy and go to this and get at it in a different angle to produce the best result.
And if
you have to be willing to do
Everybody,
that.
I don't
If
think
it
there's
leads
any
to-
argument
to your
about
point,
that,
if it
by the
leads
way.
to
I think when
peace
you
and it
say
leads to
77,
freedom,
hang on a second.
it doesn't
When you-
matter what your
hang on a second,
politics
Kennedy.
are. Everyone
When you
should
say
be for that.
77%, I think it should be 100%. I couldn't agree more. Everybody wants peace.
Yeah.
Jesse's talking about reconciliation between North and South. But there's a difference to understand exactly what is it that we are willing to
Right,
negotiate
but you
with.
criticized him
What
for
are we
going
willing
to meet with?
Juan, can I ask you,
When
can I ask
you-
you a very quick
I'm
question?
saying
Very
you have
quick.
to understand. This is what I said to Jesse. When
Very
you
quick.
have this
Very quick
meeting,
question.
it is a great concession to the president of North Korea, who has been seen as an international
Let me ask you-
outlet.
I don't
That's
see
the
it as a great
inevitability if you're going to
concession.
deal.
Right.
You're
How are
going
we supposed to talk to him then?
You're
Get
going to
anything
have
done?
to elevate the person that you're going to talk to.
That's all
There's no
I'm
way
saying.
around it.
That's all
Would
I'm saying.
Hillary Clinton have brought us to this point?
I hope so.
No, she'd be in bed at 3. She wouldn't have been there at that plane. That's too late. All right.
He'll be back.
The president's CIA nominee vowed yesterday she wouldn't restart another harsh interrogation program for terror suspects. But Dick Cheney said if it were up to him, it'd be different. That's next.
Your music better. CIA nominee Gina Haspel defended her agency's harsh interrogation program after 9/11 during a tense congressional hearing, but vowed it wouldn't restart under her watch. If Dick Cheney were still in office, he would have pressed to keep it going.
If it were my call, I would not discontinue those programs. I'd have them active and ready to go, and I'd go back and study them and learn. The agency's in a difficult position. The Congress has acted, they have changed the law, and the agency has to and will operate by that statute.
And he makes a good case for why.
I think the techniques we used were not torture. It's a lot of people try to call it that, but it wasn't deemed torture at the time. The techniques we used are techniques we used on our own people in training. We didn't go out and make them up someplace. They did a good job. They got the intelligence they needed, and we were safe from any further mass casualty attacks in the 7.5 years on our watch. So now people want to go back and try to rewrite history, but if it were my call, I'd do it again.
All right, Juan, I know it warms your heart to see Dick Cheney back in the news, but let's address the point that he made in the second soundbite there, which was we use these techniques on our own soldiers, so how would you ever qualify that as torture? Do we torture our own soldiers?
Yeah, I think anybody who's been waterboarded would tell you it's not something that's comfortable. I think they say it's like a virtual death. So I don't think that that's a standard. But what, out of respect for our former vice president, That's what he believes. It just so happens that when people have reviewed this, because so many people have had something to say about it, you look at what Senate Intel voted, again, in a Republican-dominated Congress, and they said waterboarding is torture. They said forcing people into uncomfortable poses, denying them sleep, putting hoods over their heads. They said this is not in keeping of American values and would not be done in the future. And I think similarly, when you look at what the Republican Congress did under the National Defense Authorization Act, they also rejected waterboarding. And Gina Haspel, by the way, the nominee, in contradiction to President Trump, has said, we're not doing this anymore. She rejected it and said she's not even convinced that it's effective. And that's coming from Gina Haspel.
So you support her then?
No, I don't support her because, you know, this was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because someone like Dianne Feinstein, who's the ranking Democrat on Senate Intel and who knows Gina Haspel, said, you know, it's not about one person, Kimberly. It's about American values. It's about who we are and what we represent to the world. And in that case, she said, it really goes beyond Gina Haspel. It's about what the United States Senate is signaling, not only to us as the American people, but to the world.
Kimberly?
So enhanced interrogation, with the exception of waterboarding, the techniques used, only one of them would be physical, would be the waterboarding one. There's a variety of things and tools that are used in enhanced interrogation, all of which were legal and deemed legal and appropriate at the time that Gina Haspel was serving and those above her like Brennan. So she followed the law. Would you have preferred that people in the CIA went rogue and didn't follow the law and the orders and the rules that were in place at the time and just refused to do it and refused to get the techniques done, to get the information that would have prevented something like 9/11 or would have been able to not get Osama bin Laden?
I wish it had prevented 9/11. That would have been great. But what the reality is that right now, Gina Haspel is making the point that she has a moral compass. She says she has good Kansas values. She can tell right from wrong, and she doesn't want to get engaged.
I think having a moral compass, Greg, is making sure Americans don't die.
Yeah, okay. First of all, we just captured 5 senior ISIS leaders, and they were figured out through interrogation of other ISIS affiliates for weeks. I don't think they were playing Crazy Eights and listening to soft jazz. I have a theory I want to posit.
Unless they really dislike it. Then
yeah, soft jazz or Maroon 5. Okay.
That'd work for you.
I want to posit a theory that goes beyond what we're talking, the specifics here about waterboarding, because I've been thinking about when this debate started. Like this whole debate over torture started after 9/11. And I keep asking myself, why then? And I think it's because it provides a reason for us to be wrong. I think it serves as a reflex for people who could not accept that we were the victims. And so when the talk would turn to terror and our suffering, the counter argument would be, but you torture and that's immoral and we're bigger and better than that, which, by the way, is not a debate point. That's not a fact. That's just an emotion. In the old days, stuff like this wasn't up for discussion. You didn't argue about these things, but America has changed, right? We are so navel-gazing about our own sins that we actually pulled this thing, waterboarding, this arbitrary action in which you are temporarily choking somebody as though that's worse than dropping the bomb on Hiroshima or droning cities. People, I mean, how is something like that worse than pulling out people's fingernails? It's an arbitrary tool that does not kill you, but we're using this thing as a symbol to pound America because we can't admit that for once we are the victims in this war and we should do whatever is possible. Everything should be on the table. Everything.
That is a great point. It's the whole why do they hate us where they say, oh, it's Islamophobia, it's Gitmo, it's waterboarding, and it's the blame America mentality, Greg said.
No, I think you can actually acknowledge that America is the best country on earth. And we are a better country because we do have a set of morals. And it's okay to impose those and apply them when necessary. And the problem with someone like Gina Haspel is when morality becomes a slippery slope, because the reaction, we are the victims, therefore we can do whatever we want in order to get back at those who have wronged us. That's also an emotional argument.
No, I think it's factual. I think you use
and morality, by the way, morality and emotion are two different things. But it is okay to ask what is moral, what is good, what is right. And Gina Haspel essentially made the case without directly acknowledging that torture is immoral, that torture doesn't work. And there was something wrong with the program. If there weren't, then she would have parroted exactly what Dick Cheney said. She would have said, I think we should still have enhanced interrogation. I think the program never should have been shut down. I think there is a practical application for this, but she did not. She said in no uncertain terms, she would never, ever take the CIA back to the point where they were doing that, regardless of whether or not the president believes it or asked her to do that.
That's just one, though, is in terms of waterboarding, is just one of the tools, enhanced interrogation, that's physical in its manifestation. The rest are psychological. So the people
not necessarily. I mean, but there are things. There are.
We normally wouldn't have this argument.
But I understand. Okay, but here's the difference. Here's also what makes us better. They don't have these arguments in places like China. They don't have this sort of self-examination.
I don't want us to be better.
In places like North Korea.
Can I admit that? I don't want us to be better. I want us to win.
You want us to be safer?
I want to save millions of lives.
Safer?
If you want to go to bed feeling better at night while people die, fine. I would rather save people's lives and feel worse about it.
What about the 500,000 people, 500,000 Iraqi civilians who have died because of this conflict? I don't think that Dick Cheney
died because of waterboarding, though, and we know that waterboarding works because it led us to Bin Laden. And when Obama banned it,
Cheney said we do it on our own.
We reserved the right to use it in a ticking time bomb situation.
Yeah, we do it.
We do it on our own.
But just quickly before we go to you, let me just say, we don't do things like internment camps that we did in the past. We are a changed country, and we've changed for the better because we act on American values.
We do it to our own U.S. troops, so there's not a hypocrisy here.
Ahead, Vice President Pence calls for an end to the Russia probe, and the left goes berserk.
As the Mueller probe drags on and on and on, Vice President Pence just said what a lot of us are thinking.
It's been about a year since this investigation began. Our administration has provided over 1 million documents. We've fully cooperated in it. And in the interest of the country, I think it's time to wrap it up. And I would very respectfully encourage the special counsel and his team to bring their work to completion.
But control room, cue the liberal outrage. Democrat Adam Schiff tweeting VP Pence has now brought his sycophancy to a whole new level. The investigation must continue without his interference. And of course, the liberal media is all in a twist.
He was just this just clueless, hapless Indiana Hoosier that Donald Trump and the rest of the White House said nothing to. But you've just got to start asking yourself, if Mike Pence wants to kill an investigation that is pursuing how the Russians tried to undermine American democracy in 2016.
Okay, so Kennedy, there they go again.
It's really offensive. I mean, I was born in the great state of Indiana. My family, my dad's family, they're all Hoosiers. And, you know, here's Joe using it as a pejorative term. I think it is offensive. And I think it's realistic for the vice president to ask, if not now, when? And there's a big difference saying, all right, what is the terminus of this investigation? What kind of a timeline are we looking at? That's very different than fire Mueller, lock him up. And someone has to make the distinction between those two. But people like Joe Scarborough, the now conveniently liberal bubble dweller, and Adam Schiff are incapable of making a very simple distinction like that.
All right, well done. Score one for the Hoosiers. Okay. Now, Greg, so are you going to do the conflating the issues?
No, I have a joke about Hoosiers, but now I can't use it. All right.
Oh, no.
The media and the Democrats do not want this to end. It's our IV drip that keeps them alive. This investigation keeps them alive because they've got all this good stuff happening around them. And it's the drug they're abusing. They can't let go. And they don't see the damage that this drug is doing to their party, which is eroding, and doing to themselves. And when they keep going back to this drug, it's Trump's appeal that is going up because it's turning him into a victim through this repetitive bias. But therapists must be doing great on both coasts right now because there's so many people so upset over Trump. It's amazing.
Very despondent.
Very despondent, yes. Who's your daddy?
A lot of submissions to insurance. There you go. There you go. He couldn't resist. He couldn't resist. Okay.
I was trying to work it in.
Kennedy liked it. All right. So, Jesse, so you see the situation here, and obviously the world media quite upset about it. But what the vice president is saying is very reasonable.
Yes, I'm not shocked that the vice president agrees with the president. I don't know why Morning Joe thinks that's a big deal.
Right.
Everything that's come out about the Mueller probe and the Comey probe seems to have stuck. Yet everything that's come out about this Trump collusion and obstruction has fizzled. Look at the story the other day. This breaking story about these payments from a Russian oligarch to Michael Cohen totally fizzled out. You don't even hear about it anymore because once they put out a statement clarifying what happened, it ends up being fake news. They did it with WikiLeaks. They did it with the Trump Tower meeting. They did it with the Flynn plea. This whole thing's unraveling. Mueller himself just got smacked silly by a judge when he came in front of him the other day saying he's way outside of scope of the investigation. Yeah. He's trying to take down the president. And he's withholding evidence from the defense team. It doesn't look good now. We're hearing that Comey actually consulted with Mueller after he was fired before he went and testified under oath in front of the Senate committee. So it doesn't look good. I don't believe they have an obstruction case. We've talked about it a lot before. President Trump said, hey, if there's colluders, look into it. Comey said, Mr. President, you're not under investigation. Comey also testified that he was never obstructed. He never felt obstructed. And after he was fired, the investigation went forward. I don't see it.
Juan, do you see it? You see into the future?
Well, I tell you what, it was Stormy Daniels said on Saturday Night Live, I think the storms are coming. So, you know, it's always...
That's what you got.
What's interesting to me is that you have May 17th coming, so it'll be a year into this investigation very soon. And I think lots of people say, well, how, when is this thing going to wrap up? So I think the president is playing into that narrative and saying, oh, well, it's a year and they haven't found anything. Well, but of course, we don't know what they found. And when you look at the numbers, guess what's overwhelming? In fact, it's about half of Republicans who say, yes, the Mueller investigation should be allowed to continue. Not only that, the United States Senate, led by Republicans, have said much the same thing. Don't stop the Mueller probe. Let it play out. Let it be. But I will say, I think Mueller has a sense of timeline. I think he doesn't.
You do? Why do you say that?
I think because he doesn't want it to be said that this probe interfered or influenced the midterms. Oh. So when I say that joke about Stormy and Storm's coming, I suspect that you're looking at July as a really turbulent month with some decisions being made. Obviously, part of it will have to do with whether or not the president is subpoenaed, whether he testifies, whether he takes the fifth. Mm-hmm. But I do think, boy, that behavior by Mike Pence, he looks like, a puppet on a string.
Oh, my goodness. It's very disparaging.
You want him to be your president so bad. That's what's going to happen if is
that? And it's reasonable to ask the scope of the investigation.
And you were speaking so hostily about torture. Now you're going after me.
Wait till you see what happens during the commercial break. All right. Nancy Pelosi may want to cancel her plans to become the next Speaker of the House. Find out why. Stay with us next.
The Democratic midterm blue wave we've all been hearing about for months, well, maybe disappearing. According to a new poll, the Democrats' generic ballot midterm edge is down to just 3 points. That's within the margin of error. And it's a major dip from February when the gap was plus 16 for Nancy Pelosi and company. So is this an outlier or a sign of things to come? I go to my friend Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting, right? Because you have a variety of, different polls. CNN had a poll on Wednesday with results that pretty much shocked its own, pundits, because this whole blue wave that they said was going to happen, well, it's now more like a little, drizzle here and there. No more wave. So, and I think you have to look at, when we've been talking about the accomplishments of this administration in terms of what's been happening here with North Korea. This is very historic. This is something that the country and internationally people have celebrated. You look at the economy, just the Dow Jones again posting up about 178 points at about 5:30 Eastern time.
Up for the
tonight.
year.
Yeah, and up for the year overall, which is fantastic. So people are looking at those economic indicators and seeing how it impacts them in their personal lives with their families, able to buy gas to put in the car, books for school, food on the table. And those are the things that matter. So if that's the case, usually when the economy is doing well, it bodes well for the administration, for the president, then hopefully then the thinking is for the election, the midterm election.
Jesse, the energy, though, in terms of are you planning to vote, still resides with the Democrats. So what would the president have to say about that?
Well, slight edge with Democrat enthusiasm, but in Ohio, they just had a governor's race the other day, the two primaries, and Republican turnout 150,000 voters more. So if you look at a bellwether like that, that's ominous for Democrats. I agree with Kimberly. Foreign policy and domestic policy. This country feels safe and we feel more prosperous. And all the things that they said were going to happen. They said that the gays were going to be put in internment camps. They said it was going to be ethnic cleansing in this country. They said the markets were going to crash and women weren't going to be able to have abortions. Gay marriage was going to be outlawed. All this stuff. Sky is falling, never materialized. So the country is beginning to tune out that type of fake news propaganda, and they've baked that in. Now, look. Gone from a 16 advantage to now a 3. One of the reasons why 6 in 10 voters feel like things are going well in the country. And you have someone like Nancy Pelosi, who is the most unpopular politician in this nation. And they're yes, it is one.
Oh, yeah. Check with your guy over in the Senate.
More unpopular than Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. And when you have these people in the primaries, the Democrats, they're all Bernie voters who are energized. So they're going to nominate these kooks that want to impeach the president, and they're going to go out in the general in November, and they're going to get savaged. And I'm not saying that Republicans are going to keep the House, but it doesn't look good for the Democrats.
All right. So, Kennedy, actually, it was a good week for Republicans. If you look at the candidates that won the primaries, Jeff's talking about, you didn't get kind of hard right-wing guys who in some case then implode in the general election. You got people tonight. President Trump will be in Indiana at a rally for Mike Braun, who's a pro-Trump business guy who's now going to run against
Who beat
Joe Donald.
two pro-Trump United States congressmen in order to secure that nomination to run for the Senate as a Republican in the fall. Indiana is a very important state. It's one of those politically interesting states where, yes, there is a Democratic senator right now, but that has turned into a Trump state, and they are celebrating some of that economic success with people who continue to stand behind the president. It's interesting because, you know, you guys talk about impeachment. That's the name of the game for both the far left and the far right, because the far left, people like Tom Steyer, are doing whatever they can to continue bankrolling that conversation. People on the far right and those who support the president most will do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen. So you have to see how agitated you can actually get people who are going out to vote when it comes to impeachment. But there are a lot of people now. And this is why I think the president has seen an uptick in his approval ratings, is they are no longer reacting to his behavior and his rhetoric. They are now seeing some of his ideas take root. And even if they don't agree with them, they see that he means business. And when he makes promises, he's going to do what he can in a very non-traditional way to achieve those things. And if those things, even if they didn't like them before, benefit their bottom line, then Republicans are safe. There's still a long way to go, and Republicans, they should not rest comfortably at this point. They have not achieved enough, and the economy has not affected enough people to create that sort of security and satisfaction.
Well, in fact, that's a good point, because the tax deal, which they had thought was going to be the key message for Republicans in the midterms, Greg, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be working out for them. But I will ask you, you're a former Democrat, as I believe.
I've never been anything.
You're not a Republican. You're not a Democrat.
Not a Republican.
I see.
I don't even know what I am now.
So then, as an impartial arbiter, tell me, Greg, what would you advise Democrats to do at this point?
Find a message that's beyond "we don't like Trump," because the problem is you're going to be dealing with a candidate where America does like Trump. Going back to what everybody said. This argument against Trump would work if it was a crappy economy, but you have joblessness at a 49-year low, okay? So that's out the window. Maybe Trump might start a war. That could make him very unpopular, except making peace with North Korea is a weird way to start a war. ISIS could return, but we just nabbed 5 top leaders. So it could be a new kind of terror. But here's the problem. Nobody trusts the Democrats on terror. No. They don't. They just expect Trump. If something happens, they just expect Trump to go out and kill them all, because that's basically what he's been doing. So my point is this. Until you find a message, a person, a vision, you're going to lose. But Republicans should not be comfortable.
They usually screw it up.
Yes, that's true.
Well, I just love these rose-colored glasses. An awkward encounter between Monica Lewinsky and Big Bill. It's been averted, but Monica's not happy. Find out why.
Super Beats from Human. Cause you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass.
She was Meghan Trainor before there was Meghan Trainor. 20 years after the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, Monica still can't catch a break. Town & Country magazine disinvited Lewinsky to an event this week after Bill Clinton said he'd also be coming. Lewinsky didn't take it well, tweeting, "Dear world, please don't invite me to an event, one about social change, and then after I've accepted, uninvite me because Bill Clinton then decided to attend / was invited." She did get an apology from the magazine. Kimberly, this is very poor form, and it is an embarrassment, and it just goes to show where we are politically.
Yeah, it is RUDE, and sometimes sorry just isn't good enough, right? I mean, so she took to her own defense and went on Twitter and had some words about it.
Yeah,
short and succinct. But can you imagine, like, if that was going to be an issue, why is she the one that shouldn't be able to go?
Well,
Say,
and
let her
in
go.
this era
Big enough
of
event.
Me Too, Juan, I mean, it really doesn't look good to shame the woman who was taken advantage of when she was in her early 20s as an intern and preyed upon by the most powerful man in the world.
Yeah,
Nice.
I was amused. She, in fact, was saying that when you had people like Marco Rubio blaming the intern, it wasn't right. So I think that's maybe, but you know, I think we would treat any president, Republican or Democrat, with great deference, and we wouldn't want to embarrass them. So I think that's what Town & Country did, but they should have apologized.
I think they should have had them both here. I think that would have been a much better story. Jesse Waters.
Newsmax would have done this. The Weekly Standard never, typical left-wing rude behavior. Listen, I understand why they did it. I mean, he's the president of the United States. It's awkward. Right. You ever have a party and you have a guest confirm, and then all of a sudden their ex is going to be there, and the ex is kind of like a small ball player. I mean, you cut loose the small ball player, and you have the big man on campus at the party instead. Totally understand it.
Big woman, too.
Okay, but not small ball player in this particular situation.
Well, I mean, former president of the United States.
But you know what I
and
mean.
Monica Lewinsky. I think if they're trying to curry favor with the former president, you don't mix those two people.
Guy's got no power. He's a toothless dragon.
Her.
Yes, it was disrespectful.
No, not you, but I'm saying they shouldn't do that.
I can't believe they're talking about this. I am outraged. I just canceled my subscription to Town & Country.
There it is.
I know my twins, Ashley and Mortimer, will be crushed, and we'll have to find something new to read when we're all getting our herbal caffeine enemas at the spa.
It's just warming up. One more thing is next. Stay right
That's
here.
how it works. One more thing, Jesse.
I'm actually just going to read the headline here. Canadian zoo owners face charges for letting bear get ice cream at Dairy Queen. They took the bear to a drive-through Dairy Queen and fed the bear ice cream. We don't know what flavor it was. We're thinking maybe Moose Tracks, Greg.
Oh, nice.
But they're now in some hot water because this is just wrong and dangerous. Yes. And this is the kind of things that happen in Canada.
Fine.
This is the lead story in Canada right now.
Wow. I like that. What about you, Juan? Got any bears?
Well, no, but remember the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Well, in the real world, a truck on its way from the chocolate factory had this happen. Yes. The big truck flipped over and outspilled 12 tons of liquid chocolate. Sweet. Well, Polish officials had to close the road as the chocolate dried under the spring sun. My friend, White Chocolate, also known as Greg Gutfeld,
thank you.
is now on his way to Poland to help carrying the latest version of Willy Wonka's golden ticket.
Look at that. All right. It's me. Time for Greg's romance news. You know, people often wonder when me and Brian Kilmeade fight on the show, do we get along? Well, this is tape of us after the show on was it Friday? We get it. It's a lot of playful fighting. Hard to tell because we're both very hairy with our clothes off. Do you know, those are actually two male marmots? Marmots?
Yeah.
They were having a fight over a female counterpart in northwest China's Gansu province. And enough of that because we have to move on. Kimberly.
I'm thinking you're the one on the right. Okay, anyway. All right, well, this adorable little girl was enjoying an icy treat when her father asked her, what are you eating? Well, now she knew what it was, of course, but she's having a little bit of trouble pronouncing the word. No matter how many times Dad told her what it was, she continued to say popsicle incorrectly. Take a look.
How about pop?
Pop.
Sickle.
Sickle.
Popsicle.
Popsicle.
So pop.
Pop.
Sickle.
Sickle.
Popsicle.
Popsicle.
Okay, one more time. What do you
So
got there?
cute. That's like how I feel with Greg when Greg is,
When I'm eating a popsicle.
no, when you're mispronouncing all the words.
Kennedy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he's a frigid treat. Well, let's go to my other home state of Oregon, where they're trying to figure out the GOAT of golf. Not the greatest of all time, but they have GOAT caddies in Seneca, Oregon at the McVeigh Gauntlet course, and they are just adorable. They only work about 6 hours a day, 3 days a week, but there are enough of them, and they're protected by dogs, that they have specially designed bags so golfers, duffers rather, can reach in and get their sticks and swing for the greens, thanks to some friends who are not finicky, who will eat anything.
You don't have to tip them.
They seem so calm.
Never pet
Set
learning
your
goat.
DVRs, never miss an episode of The Five. Get ready, get